Now, today, the Liberal Democrats are unveiling the party's plan for equalities and human rights. This comes, of course, on the Equal Pay Day that is today. What are you planning by way of policies that's going to change things for people?
Thank you. Well, yes, it is very important that, and I'm delighted that we do have a specific focus on how we want to achieve equalities and human rights in this country, because we're on a journey, but we're not quite there. We want to ensure that we are achieving that real equality, and in order to do so, one of the things we want to do is to tackle the rise in hate crimes that we see. They've more than doubled over the last couple of years. We want to make them all aggravated offences. We also want to provide funding for protective security measures at our places of worship, at our schools and community centres that unfortunately we know are vulnerable to both hate crimes and to terrorist attacks. And we want to complete the introduction of equal marriage. We haven't yet done that, and that's one of the things we want to achieve. And we also want to reduce the overrepresentation of people from ethnic minority backgrounds throughout our criminal justice system.
In terms of, you talk about the rise in hate crimes, more than doubled. I mean, the reports of hate crimes have risen, but there's a lot of concern over hate crimes as being, if you look at the actual definition under the Crown Prosecution Service definition and from police forces, it is completely subjective. Someone could not be a victim. Someone could just see two people having an argument, and one of them is an ethnic minority, and they can, or a woman or someone disabled, and someone could just report that as a hate crime, even if it was just actually a conversation between friends. If they misinterpret it, that still counts as a hate crime statistic. Does that not concern you that perhaps we need to be a little bit more careful about these statistics?
Well, no, I know, because I hear it from people all the time about the rise in hate crime that we're seeing against all different people and from all different backgrounds. This is very, very serious, actually. I think if we're serious as a country about contending and improving equality, then these are one of the things that we need to address. And all too often, actually, we know people that don't report, that don't come forward. That's why we have important initiatives like Hate Crime Awareness Week, to give people the confidence to know that if they come forward, that they're, when they report what are crimes, that they're taken seriously.
But absolutely. If someone is abused, is someone is shouted at or treated, or God forbid, violently assaulted because of their being a minority or religion or gender or sexuality or anything, absolutely that's a crime. But the hate crime definition doesn't just limit it to that. It actually is someone saying something that someone didn't like. Someone giving someone a dirty look. That's not a crime in most people's eyes.
I know how difficult it is for people to come forward to report those crimes, and I know that, to their credit, the police contend with these things incredibly seriously, as they should. And I certainly haven't heard of people coming forward to report things that haven't happened.
Yes, well, no. On the contrary, there have been plenty of evidence of cases of people coming forward who've been questioned by the police and accused of a hate crime when they've done nothing of the sort. I mean, we need to protect people who are victims of hate crime. We need to prevent that from happening and punish those who commit them. But we need to be clear, do we not, about what actually is a hate crime? You've been a victim. You've been a victim of hate crime, no doubt at all. As a prominent Jewish woman in politics, no doubt at all. Even from, say, members of your former political party, it was one of the reasons you left. But we need to be very careful that we don't criminalise normal human interaction.
I don't think there's any risk of that at all. I mean, I certainly haven't received any reports of people saying that has happened. I think the struggle has been for people to have the confidence to know that if they come forward, that what has happened to them will be taken seriously, and actually we need to do more to empower people and give them the confidence that's how things will be treated when they go to the police. And
is there any evidence that it's not taken seriously by the police yet at the moment?
Well, we know from the levels of underreporting. We know from third parties that are able to report on other people's behalf that people do lack the confidence to come forward. I hear it all the time, that people are scared about the consequences. And actually, we need to be doing more to give people the confidence that when they do come forward, that what's happened to them will be taken very seriously and people will be held to account. I don't think it's helpful to suggest that people are coming forward to make malicious claims, because that's certainly...
No, I'm not talking about people making malicious claims. I didn't say that at all. I just think the definition of hate speech as hate crime is a troubling definition, and under our terms of engagement in this country, where people are innocent until proven guilty, you can be effectively accused of and have a hate crime statistic without any crime actually having taken place at all on an objective basis. Well, let's talk about other issues as well. The SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon, has now effectively joined in legal action with your party leader, Jo Swinson of the Liberal Democrats, against the ITV over the fact they've decided to have a head-to-head debate on the 19th of November, just between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson as future possible prime ministers. Do you know how that your case is developing there? Is there any likelihood that the other party leaders are going to be included in that currently head-to-head?
Oh, well, we're taking this incredibly seriously, and we're taking it seriously because it's only right that when people sit down to watch these debates, that they are provided with all the candidates for Prime Minister. And at the moment, and I hear it on the doorstep, it's that the choice between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn is no choice at all. And people deserve and expect also, as precedent tells us, to hear from the Liberal Democrats, as happened in 2010. So it's highly regrettable that ITV have so far made the decision not to include the Liberal Democrats in the head-to-head, the primetime head-to-head. And I sincerely hope that, it's highly regrettable that we're even having to go down this path. And I hope that it will be resolved very soon.
But you must understand the reasons why they've done that in terms of the people who've actually got any realistic likelihood of being Prime Minister on December the 13th. I mean, your party would need to get win more than 300 seats, which on the current state of polling, it could happen, anything could happen, but it's unlikely.
Also, as you said, there's two things to point to. First of all, in 2010, Nick Clegg was fully participating in all of those debates. As a country, we shouldn't be...
Your party was polling virtually twice the level at the time and had 3 times as many MPs at the time.
No, that's not true. The polling that at the start of the campaign was very similar to what it was at the start of this campaign. So on that basis...
No, it's not. No, it isn't. It isn't at all. But Nick Clegg was much further ahead in the polls, and he had 2 or 3, I think almost 3 times as many MPs.
Well, my understanding of it most certainly is that the polling was very, very close to what it was at the start of this campaign as it was before as and when the debates were announced back in 2010. And I remember those debates very, very clearly where, again, people had the opportunity to hear from lots of different parties. And whether we like it or not, this election is coming at a moment when we should have, in my view, had a referendum on the issue of Brexit. We're not being afforded that opportunity. And when it comes to debates, it's ludicrous that the country's not going to be able to hear at this moment in time in that particular debate from the party of Remain, the party that wants to stop Brexit. Essentially going to be hearing from 2 people that want to implement Brexit.
OK, I'm just going to reiterate, but ahead of the 2010 election, the Liberal Democrats had 62 MPs and they were on 22% of the vote at that time.
And there was a poll that put us on 21%, so...
Most of the polls are putting Liberal Democrats in the early to mid-teens.
There's lots of different polls, and I've seen a poll that put us on 21% when that decision was made.
Let me ask you finally about the possibility of more of a Remainer pact, Remainer alliance. You've done one obviously with the Greens and Plaid Cymru over some 60-plus seats, but perhaps with other Remainer MPs across the Labour Party. Is it likely there are going to be some, if not formal pacts with the Labour Party, but perhaps unofficial pacts, running some paper candidates in some seats in local areas?
No, absolutely not. The challenge is that whether we like it or not, and it's much to my upset that the Labour Party is supposed to be a party of internationalism, but as we heard it this week on broadcast, we heard it from the mouth of one of the candidates who is one of the most senior members of the Labour Party. The Labour Party, as she said, is not a party of Remain. We are a party of Remain. We are a party that wants to stop Brexit, and therefore we are at odds with that party. And also for many different reasons, we're not going to do anything that's going to put Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. This
ongoing battle for this election, it does feel like it's going on for months already, doesn't it? But major new announcements. We haven't even seen these manifestos yet from any of the major parties. But we know now that Nicola Sturgeon, your party leader, she is joining in this legal action against ITV, which Jo Swinson, the Lib Dem leader, has launched to demand that she is given a place on a podium for that ITV leaders debate on the 19th of November. It's going to be a head-to-head between between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson. Nicola Sturgeon wants to take part. Hasn't she got even less claim than Jo Swinson? Is Jo Swinson is standing Liberal Democrat candidates pretty much across the board of the country? Most people in the UK don't have an opportunity to vote for an SNP candidate. On what basis is Nicola Sturgeon entitled to be in a debate between two people who could be our next UK Prime Minister?
Well, there's a couple of different answers to that. First of all, this is fundamentally unfair, and it fails to recognise that the UK is no longer a two-party state, and particularly in Scotland, this wouldn't be a debate between the two leading parties. Instead, it would ignore the country's largest party, which, according to the latest polls, is also on track to win the third largest number of seats UK-wide. By contrast, if you contrast that in Scotland, the polls show Labour in fourth place. The SNP, it's important to know this, that the SNP is a third party in terms of Commons representation in the Parliament that's just finished, and that we're also one of the biggest political parties in the UK in terms of membership. So this is fundamentally unfair. There is a final point about this debate, which is also really important. By the time this debate takes part, many of the voters will have already cast their postal ballots, meaning this debate will give Labour and the Tories an unfair advantage over the SNP and other parties.
I mean, now that is a fair point, because a lot of people do get their postal ballots and send them in rather early. But there are plenty of other. I mean, goodness me, my diary is full of all these different debates, which Sky's doing, ITV's doing, and BBC's doing. There'll be plenty of other opportunities, won't there?
Well, there won't really. This is obvious. These debates are really scheduled as the big headline debates, and we know from previous years that they can shape opinion.
Hold on a minute. Do they make a difference? Nick Clegg back in 2010. Remember the whole, I agree with Nick from Gordon Brown and David Cameron, all that. I mean, that moved the Liberal Democrats 1 percentage points in the polls and led to them getting fewer seats than they'd previously had.
Well, you've just made the point. This is a very unusual election. There's every chance that this will be a hung parliament, and 1% movement could be absolutely critical in the final destination of the seats. And that's also really important, because it's entirely possible the SNP will hold the balance of power in the House of Commons after the election, making it all the more important that our perspective is heard and recognised in that UK context.
Now, of course, you could bring me on to my next question in terms of holding the balance of power. And there's a lot of the attack lines from the Conservatives have been over the idea that it will be Jeremy Corbyn be propped up by Nicola Sturgeon. And that would require a second referendum, not just on the EU, as is promised by the Labour Party, but also a second referendum on Scottish independence. Now, Jeremy Corbyn yesterday has been accused of incoherence after he promoted 3 different positions on a second referendum in one day. He said he would withhold permission for an independence ballot within the next 5 years if he became Prime Minister, even if the SNP won most, as you have done previously, of Scotland's 59 constituencies. But his aides immediately suggested this could be relaxed if the SNP wins control of Holyrood in the 2021 Scottish Parliament. And then he reverted to a previous position when he said that a referendum would not be a priority in the early years of a Labour administration. What would be the price of the SNP giving support and shoring up a Corbyn minority administration?
Well, first of all, I think you've just underlined that Jeremy Corbyn can't seem to make up his mind on Brexit. He can't seem to make up his mind on much else. So I won't put too much store into what he's saying from one day to the next. But this isn't about extracting a price. This is about realising a mandate that already exists in the Scottish Parliament in the 2016 election. Don't forget, in Scotland, we fought an election and won, as we won the last 12. Won an election based on the fact that there would be a mandate for an independence referendum because of the changed circumstances. That's happened, and it's there, and it must be put into place.
And how soon? So the price. Okay. So yeah, there's no doubt there's been a material change of circumstances, and that was you have the mandate for that. If we have a minority Labour government, can only be in power if the SNP support will the requirement be that a referendum is held in 2020? How soon would it have to be?
Well, basically we've said that we're putting legislation through the Scottish Parliament to ensure a referendum is held in 2020. That's what we'd like to see. The mandate exists for that. I said the last 12 elections, by the way, I meant over the last 12 years, just to clarify. But there is a mandate there that exists in the Scottish Parliament already. We've won the last 2 Westminster elections, We've won the Scottish parliamentary election. There is no doubt that a mandate exists for that to happen. This isn't about a price that is being extracted. This is about the right for the Scottish people to get what they've voted in a government to provide, which is an independence referendum in these changed circumstances in the UK. People in Scotland need a choice over their future, whether or not they want to remain in this kind of Brexit, broken Westminster system, or if they want to see Scotland as an independent country taking its own place at the table in the European Union.
And just finally, Nicola Sturgeon today is going to be talking about a fairer pension system and restoring the TV licences for over 75s. And also she's opposing the current plan for the government to increase the state pension age to 68 by 2038 and a plan to raise state pension age to 75 in the future. How on earth are we going to afford to keep the state pension age as it is when we have an ageing population and people are just living longer and longer and longer and often in very good health and able to work? We can't have people basically living on a state pension for 40 years. The country will go bankrupt.
Well, all good governance is about making spending choices. And of course, I could list many things. I'll start with one of the biggest ticket items that the UK wastes money on, which is the Trident nuclear replacement system. It's currently priced at a lifetime tag of £205 billion. Now, those are the types of choices that you can choose not to invest in. If I stay on nuclear, you could look at the amount of money that's being wasted on new nuclear power as well. This is about making a choice for people in the future. The fact is that the fact of the matter is at the moment the Tories are betraying older people with the way they're treating them, forcing the BBC into a position where it's removing TV licences for the over 75s, pushing up pensions, ignoring the rights of the WASPy women who've lost their pension, sometimes up to about £40,000 or £50,000 with virtually no warning it was going to happen. That's fundamentally unfair and needs to be addressed by different choices.
Let's talk about the flooding. A lot of concern that, look, we know the government can't stop the rain from falling, but Tory government's been in charge since 2010, and we know that we have seen some of this, the works to actually prevent flooding. There's work on flood preventions and drainage and dredging of rivers and all of that. The spending on that has plummeted since 2010. People are right, those local people are right not to be happy with the Prime Minister for the failure to deal with this and prevent their homes from being flooded, aren't they?
Well, look, let me be very clear. And I remember in 2013-14 when we had the tidal surge on the East Coast that hit my constituency and the dreadful flooding through the Somerset levels as well. And I was doing flood recovery work for local government then. And water, you see the brutality of nature. It's utterly devastating. But we also need to be very clear about the facts. And I just think one of your guests there was just slightly off the accuracy, because flood defence funding has actually increased by about 22% since 2010. And we're investing £2.6 billion into projects that actually are very, very much focused on the flooding from rivers as well as the sea and groundwater. So that will help another 300,000 homes over the next couple of years.
It's increased a lot since 2010 because it went down in 2010, so the increase is from a lower number.
Well, look, I'm not going to make any apologies for the mess that Labour left, and we had to make some very tough decisions. But we have increased our flood defence protection investment, and that is continuing, as the Chancellor said the other day. But what we have got to be focused on is in this dreadful situation, and people in the run-up to Christmas, it can be devastating. I think you have seen the images on TV, and if you visited people who have had the experience of what water can do, it is utterly tragic when you see it. It's quite heartbreaking. And we've got to make sure that the Bellwyn scheme, which gives the financial support to local authorities, the individual support to people and to businesses, is in place. And that's what the Prime Minister's been focused on ensuring is properly delivered.
Well, let me ask you, before we move on to, I know what big announcements from your party today, what you make of what Jeremy Corbyn had to say when he was questioned about the killing of the world's most wanted terrorist, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He said that arresting him would have been the right thing to do, despite the fact that the Islamic State chief detonated a suicide vest when American Special Forces cornered him a few weeks ago. What did you make of that intervention?
I thought it was astonishing, and not just that comment, but actually if you look at what he said and the tone with which he said it, my reading of it was he was effectively questioning the statements from the US about what happened, our greatest and arguably one of our longest allies. I just thought it was astonishing, and it just sums up the approach he took over Salisbury, where he backed Russia, our enemies, over the UK intelligence agencies. I just think this is a man, and I very much to heart personally, we have got a duty to make sure he is nowhere near being the Prime Minister who has has any responsibility for the security of this country. I simply don't trust him to do that.
OK, well, security is obviously under your remit as a security minister in the Home Office. Your boss, the Home Secretary Priti Patel, is publishing new research today using official government figures showing that net migration will increase under a Corbyn-led Labour government, which would put public services under increasing pressure. Where are these figures from, and what are you basing this prediction?
Well, what we can see is if you look at what Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, even in just a few days ago, the end of October, was saying, and let alone their conference statement, they want to extend free movement to the world. If you look at the assessment we've made, is about 840,000 net migration a year. That's the equivalent of Newcastle and Manchester's populations coming into the UK every year. That is actually, I would suggest, quite a low estimate. And we've done that estimate based on looking at what happened when the 8 and plus 2 countries joined the EU, based on their population in the UK, and using the lowest levels that they had from the lowest countries. So, if anything, it's a low bar that we've looked at. But it just gives an indication of what free movement from the world could mean. And that's why we've been very clear. We want to set a proper points-based system, that we want to have fair and equal treatment for the entire world, but with control. And that means we can start to see, at long last, where many of us have let people down over many years because of the free movement of the EU and the lack of ability to get a proper points-based system through Parliament. With a good, clear Conservative majority, we can do that, get control and see immigration reduce.
But to be fair, since 2010, under David Cameron, under Theresa May, and she being the former Home Secretary as well, we've still seen the immigration that you can control outside the EU, that has gone up. Even that has been often double, sometimes 3 times the level of the net migration target of 100,000, which David Cameron adopted in a back-of-the-envelope calculation back in 2010. I mean, even when you have had the power to control it, you haven't controlled it. Realistically, immigration's going to go up whether we elect a Labour or a Tory government.
No, I accept the point you're making, Julian. As an ex-immigration minister, is another role I've held. Although when I was immigration minister, I did see immigration come down. But look, I accept the point you're making. But I would just say there's a very big difference. And this is, firstly, yes, as we leave the EU, we end free movements. We have control of the EU countries, not currently had. But when you look at the rest of the world, you're quite right. But there is a difference. We've not had a clear working majority or the space in Parliament to be able to put a points-based immigration system through Parliament. Even 2010 to 2015, I think most of your listeners would agree that Liberal Democrats are not exactly renowned for supporting immigration controls. Whereas with a good, proper, clear Conservative majority, we can get that legislation through and have a points-based system for the entire world that's firstly fair, but also gives us control in a way that means that the people coming to this country are people who contribute and play an important part in our communities and our economy.
Well, let's also talk about, what is going to happen on December the 12th. Lots of that's going to depend on what choices are offered to the voters on that day and who's standing candidates. We know, of course, from last week that Nigel Farage, the Brexit Party leader, he announced he was standing down candidates in the 317 seats which had been won by the Conservatives in 2017 to give the Tories a free run there. He had been asking for the Tory Party to stand down candidates in the seats where he feels the Brexit Party are best placed to win seats, perhaps in the north of the country, where people were very unlikely to want to vote Tory, but could be willing to take their votes away from the Labour Party for the Brexit Party if they were Leave supporters. Now, by all accounts, today, and according to the papers, there have been talks at a very high level, but the offer from the Conservatives so far has only been basically, we'll put up paper candidates in 40 Labour-held constituencies. You can fight those seats properly. We'll just do a minimal campaigning, but we're not going to stand down any candidates. Do you think that on December the 13th, if you don't have a majority and we're back in hung parliament territory, because goodness knows the polls could be wrong and we could end up seeing us back where we started again, that's what happened in 2017, you're going to regret not doing a deal with Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party?
Well, look, there's a lot of rumours around what may or may not have been said, but I'll be very clear about our position, and actually what I personally have always thought, and going back and wearing a bit of my hat as the ex-chairman of the party, is we're the Conservative and Unionist Party, and we want to form a government. For that we need a majority. We need to be, and we should be, fighting all of these seats to win, to make sure people have the option of good Conservative representation as part of a Conservative government. We want to win these seats ourselves, and we will be going flat out, not doing deals with people. The other parties are coming up with all these kind of deals. We just want to say to people a very simple message. if you want to get Brexit done, invest in our public services, see a positive opportunities taken in the future, and have an exciting year, not a year of mess and chaos again, there's only one thing to do, and that's vote Conservative.
OK, but there'll be lots of local constituency party members who are very strong Leave supporters. One of the reasons why they voted for Boris Johnson as party leader. A lot of them voted Leave in 2016. A number of Tories voted for the Brexit Party in the May European elections earlier this year. They may well choose, if they feel the Brexit Party's got a better chance, to effectively have paper candidates themselves in some of those seats to give the Brexit Party a freer run. Would you endorse that?
No, look.
If that's a local party decision.
The beauty of democracy is that individuals get a chance in that ballot box to vote for who they think is the right person to represent them. In the Conservative Party, first of all, our party rules are clear. You support and you work for and you get the Conservatives elected. But I would say to anybody who wants to see Brexit done, and any Conservative out there, the only way to guarantee we get Brexit done and have a Conservative Prime Minister with a proper majority to get things done in Parliament, not just Brexit, but a whole range of things, including our new immigration policy, we need a Conservative majority. And for that, we need to vote Conservative.
Can I ask you, first of all, about this talk about a deal with the Brexit Party? Now, we know that many in the European Research Group are rather, should we say, sympathetic to the Brexit Party at Nigel Farage over the wanting to do some sort of deal. We know there are lots of seats in parts of the country, particularly in the north, where people will vote for anyone other than a Tory, even though they've got a strong Leave vote in many of those seats. Now, according to the Daily Telegraph, the Conservatives offered an electoral pact to Nigel Farage that would mean the Brexit Party, instead of standing in 300-odd seats, having already agreed to not stand candidates in those seats won by the Tories in 2017, so not standing in those 317 seats, but doing a pact so they would just go down to just 40 key seats, in return for which Boris Johnson would put up paper candidates. They'd be registered as Tory candidates, but they really wouldn't do any campaigning so that the Brexit Party could try to take those seats. However, he wouldn't stand those candidates down completely, and Nigel Farage has turned that offer down. We spoke to the Brexit Party chairman, Richard Tice, a little bit earlier, who said they weren't prepared to stand those candidates down. Do you think that was a mistake by your party leader?
Well, look, Julia, on your first point, it is... I'm sorry, I'm a bit croaky this morning. It's been called a door knocking in the cold and the wet. But, it is true that there are lots of informal links between the ERG and the Brexit Party going back a while. Even with people like Farage and Tice before they were in the Brexit Party itself. So we know them quite well. But, I personally have not been privy to any such negotiations. So I'm sorry to be unhelpful, but I can't give you the inside scoop because I wasn't on the inside. What I do know is most Brexit Party supporters passionately want to leave the European Union. That I do know. Also, people like myself passionately want to leave the European Union. So working purely from first principles, as we both want the same end state at the end of this whole thing, it does make some sense that we don't tear lumps out of each other and we concentrate our fire on those Labour and Liberal Democrats who have spent 3 years pulling every trick in the book in Parliament to keep us in the EU against the wishes of the referendum. That, to me, makes sense.
But aren't you, if in the event of December the 13th, we get the polls show that there could be a majority of the Tory party right now. They showed a bigger majority and much better in the polls for the Tories this time round at this stage of the election campaign for Theresa May in 2017. OK, different leader, different kind of election. But nevertheless, the Labour Party went up from, I think it rose about 23 points during that election campaign. In which case, if you wake up on December the 13th and you haven't got a majority, or indeed enough of a minority government that you could perhaps do a deal with maybe some Brexit Party candidates, and Jeremy Corbyn is in number 10 with the backing of, the SNP, the Lib Dems or whoever, you're going to regret not doing that deal, aren't you?
Well, look, I have no doubt that Corbyn would do a deal with the devil if it meant that he could get into number 10. And once you've got a Marxist Prime Minister, he's not likely going to let go of the reins of power. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. But, Farage has said that he isn't going to stand candidates against any defending Conservatives. For him, that won't have been an easy decision. I think he's made the right decision. I think he needs to think carefully about where exactly he does stand further candidates and what effect that will have. But to answer your question directly, the surest way for someone, a voter, to be sure that we will leave the European Union and will have a majority Conservative government that protects this country from a bunch of Marxists is to vote Conservative.
In the event of, as I say, of there being a hung parliament again, and if there were Brexit Party candidates, Brexit Party MPs, presumably Boris Johnson, the Conservatives, would be happy to go into negotiations, go into some sort of coalition with them?
Well, forgive me, but you're slightly putting the cart before the horse here. Let's see what the result of the election is, and then let's talk about who might negotiate what with who.
All right.
But, we've still got, in fairness, we've still got a month to go.
We do. It feels like it's a lot longer. Not been a great 24 hours for your party leader, though. We had that big campaign speech yesterday, and we've had that campaign video. But we also saw a lot of videos of Boris Johnson talking to victims of the flooding across the north of England. And again, he wasn't being shouted at. People were being very polite, but there was a quiet sort of seething anger at the fact that actually a lot of the problems with the flooding that we are seeing is a result of the flood defences not having the sort of money spent on them since 2010 under various different Tory governments, and really asking him what he's going to do about it, and indeed also asking about him replacing all the lost public services funding that has been lost over those last 9 years. It wasn't a good day for Boris Johnson, supposedly this star campaigner, this man who the people absolutely love. We didn't see much of his stardust yesterday.
Well, look, firstly, the Prime Minister has gone to see the difficulties for himself. And Julia, if you've just been flooded, you're going to be upset. Of course you are. And I was the Armed Forces Minister in 2014-15 when we had all those floods on the Somerset levels. And the Armed Forces, just as now, got involved to help do their best to alleviate the difficulties. And I well remember how upset people were at that time that they've been flooded. So, of course, people are going to be angry, and understandably so. But I think it's to the Prime Minister's credit that rather than just stay in London or in his own constituency, he went to the north to see these problems for himself and to get direct feedback from those who have been adversely affected. I think whether or not it made good television is not the point. I think it was the correct thing to do.
And in terms of when we move on with the general election campaign, obviously your party definitely wants it to be all about Brexit, getting Brexit done as the Brexit, the main Brexit party. But obviously Labour Party very keen to make it about issues about public services and the NHS and things like that. We talked a lot about those recently. Immigration very much came to the fore today, though. There's been seems to be a little bit of a row going on between some of the trade unions, leaders like Len McCluskey of Unite and the Labour Party leadership in terms of what the immigration policy should be for the Labour Party. In terms of a Labour Party conference voted a few months ago just to have a sort of basically an open door policy to continue free migration, free movement with the EU. Len McCluskey's been speaking out against that. Do you think that's going to be a bit of an open goal for the Conservatives, or is that going to be a problem for you on the basis that actually you've been promising to limit immigration for years and totally failed to do so, even with the immigration levels from outside the EU, which you have had control of all this time?
Well, let's do immigration first, and then I know we're always tight for time. Let's quickly come to health, if I may. Immigration, Labour are fundamentally split. Corbyn and McDonnell believe in completely open borders. They don't believe ideologically in any form of immigration control. Many members of their trade unions who've seen the effect on that on their members' livelihoods do, and I think this is a row that will rumble on within Labour, but very publicly as well in the media through the election. Health, they're all over the place. Jonathan Ashworth, their health spokesman, went on telly, I think it was the other morning.
Yesterday, well, he was on my show as well, yes.
Well, right, and he absolutely categorically denied that Labour's ludicrous plans for a 4-day week would apply to the NHS, because as we all know, the NHS are struggling to recruit and crucially retain enough skilled clinical staff as it is. So Ashworth says There's no way this is going to apply to the NHS. He then does a press conference at lunchtime with McDonald, who basically says, oh, yes, it is. So the health secretary says it won't, and the shadow health secretary says it won't, and basically chides the media for spreading, Tory scare stories and such like. And then at lunchtime, his own shadow chancellor publicly overrules him and says that it will. I mean, and these people want charge of our health service. It is utter chaos. When you talk to senior NHS leaders, as I do, those that my constituents are in the care of, they'll tell you, Julia, that of course they would always like more money, but the critical problem in the NHS is staff. It's recruiting, and crucially, I say it again, retaining really skilled staff to work under often tremendous pressure. And I think anyone listening to this interview in the NHS, whoever they vote for, I hope instinctively would agree with that statement, because they face the challenges every day. So to say it's a 5-day week, no, it's a 4-day week, I mean, it's just lunacy.